The Apache. Rashmina's eyes flashed back and forth between Bassoon and the Taliban fighters on the ridge. The Taliban had to have seen her brother waving his arms. But they weren't going to come down the mountain to him. He was going to have to go up to them. Bassoon put his hands down and started to climb. "Bassoon, stop!" Rashmina screamed. He was too far away to hear her. Rashmina flew down the hill after him. She was going much faster than he was now, but she still had to cross the ravine at the bottom of the valley and climb the hill on the other side. She was never going to make it. "Bassoon, you idiot!" Rashmina yelled. "Come back!" Bassoon ignored her. Up and up he climbed, getting closer to the Taliban. Rashmina stumbled into the bottom of the ravine. Her brother was already more than halfway up the next hill. He was going to get to the Taliban before Rashmina could catch him. "Bassoon!" she cried. "Please, don't go!" She looked around, desperately trying to think of anything she could do, anything she could say to keep her twin brother from joining the Taliban. Whoop, 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 whoop. Rashmina felt the vibrations before she heard it. An Apache. The American helicopter thundered over the hill and down the ravine like an angry animal, swooping so low it blew dirt and rocks up in the great brown swirls. To Rashmina, it looked like a giant metal grasshopper, green all over, with a big nose, long tail, and folded up wings. Only, underneath these wings were missiles and machine guns. Was the helicopter out looking for their missing soldiers? Phew! A rocket streaked from one of the Apache's wings straight towards the ridge where the Taliban had been standing moments before. And fathoom! The hillside exploded. Boulders broke loose from the mountain and tumbled down towards Rashmina. She dove behind a rock and cowered as the landslide rumbled by, pelting her with dirt and bouncing stones. The Americans weren't looking for their soldiers. They were looking for revenge. Rashmina heard the Taliban firing back, their Soviet rifles clanging the metal poles on a corrugated roof. Tung, 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 tung. When the avalanche settled, Rashmina peeked out from behind her cover. Had her brother been hit by the blast? She couldn't see him anywhere. Bassoon, that idiot, if he was dead, Rashmina was going to kill him. Rashmina watched the Apache spin, its guns never leaving their target at the top of the ridge. White hot streaks, as bright as the sun, shot out from underneath it like fireworks. Tracer bullets. They were so fast, Rashmina saw them before she heard them. Tat, 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 tat. The helicopter descended, getting closer and closer, and the sound of bullets hitting the hillside got louder and louder. Rashmina put her hands over her ears and winced. She had to know if Bassoon was all right. If he was hurt, the cowardly worm, she had to help him. Rashmina stood in a crouch and ran up the hill, hands still covering her ears. The Apache hadn't seen her. It kept pounding the ridge where the Taliban had been. Tat, 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 tat. Rashmina kept her head down, watching her feet on the broken ground as she ran. In a few breathless heartbeats, she was at the last place she had seen her twin brother. Fresh rocks from the explosion littered the ground. "Bassoon!" she cried. "Bassoon, where are you?" A hand reached out from behind a rock and yanked her to the ground. "Get down, you idiot!" her brother yelled. "Bassoon!" Rashmina cried. Her brother was alive. Rashmina threw her arms around him, then socked him in the arm. "Ow!" Bassoon cried. "I can't believe you really left to join the Taliban. You have water for brains." Bullets struck the hillside right above them, and Rashmina and her brother flinched. "We have to get out of here," Rashmina cried. The Apaches stood shooting in their direction and roared off over the top of the hill in pursuit of the Taliban. Bassoon took Rashmina's hand and pulled her to her feet. "Come on, let's go," he said. The way back down into the ravine was too wide open. If the helicopter came back, it would see them, and it was clear the Americans were in a shoot first, ask questions later kind of mood. Rashmina and her brother ran sideways along the hillside instead, hand in hand, away from the battle. "You're not supposed to be here," Bassoon cried. "Neither are you," Rashmina yelled back. Rashmina's feet slipped and twisted on the uneven ground, and she felt a twinge in her ankle. Her lungs burned and her heart felt like it was going to burst, but she kept moving. They couldn't stop. Rashmina glanced back over her shoulder to look for the helicopter. There was still no sign of it. "Rashmina, watch out!" Bassoon cried, and she faced forward again. Open sky stretched out in front of Rashmina, and her heart dropped into her stomach. A cliff. Rashmina tried to turn, to dig her feet in and stop, and she fell down hard on her backside and lost Bassoon's hand. She'd been running too fast, and her momentum carried her down towards the edge of the cliff. She twisted onto her belly to claw at the ground, but with a strangled scream, she felt her feet and then her legs slip over the side. She was going over the cliff. "Rashmina!" Bassoon cried. He threw himself face first on the ground and grabbed her hands, halting her before she slid entirely over the edge. Only Rashmina's head and shoulders and arms were still on solid ground. The rest of her twisted frantically in the wind. Rashmina puffed and panted, swallowing a scream. She kicked and churned her feet, but there was nothing under her, only air. In her mind's eye, she saw herself losing her grip, tumbling, falling. She'd had this nightmare before, tossing and turning under her blankets as she fell through the sky, trying to grab hold of something, anything, as the ground rushed up to her, jerking awake in a sweat right before she hit. Only this time, waking up wouldn't save her. "Bassoon!" Rashmina cried. "Hold on! Don't let me fall!" Her twin brother grunted and strained, trying to pull her back up. His eyes were wild with panic. Sweat popped out in beads on his forehead. Rashmina kept kicking her legs, trying to find something to stand on, to push herself back up. Then she felt it. Not a rock or a ledge below her, but a vibration. It started in the pit of her stomach and moved up her body. The hair on Rashmina's arm stood on end, and then, like an eagle riding a thermal, something big and powerful rose up behind her. Whoomp, 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 whoomp. The American helicopter. The Apache hovered in the air right behind her, so close that when Rashmina turned her head, she could see the pilot through the windshield. A huge machine gun, bigger than Rashmina herself, hung from the bottom of the helicopter. Wherever the pilot's gaze went, the machine gun followed, as though one was tied to the other. The pilot looked left, then right. Then the pilot looked at Rashmina, still hanging over the cliff, and the machine gun aimed directly at her.